7 years before Neil Armstrong took his famous first steps, President John F. Kennedy delivered one of his most quoted and most famous speeches. With apologies for the dated language, here is an excerpt from that speech, delivered on September 12th, 1962, titled, "We Choose to Go to the Moon." We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come. But condense, if you will, the 50,000 years of man's recorded history in a time span of about half a century. Stated in these terms, we know very little about the first 40 years, except at the end of them, advanced man had learned to use the skins of animals and cover themselves. Then about 10 years ago, under this standard, man emerged from his caves to construct other kinds of shelter. Only 5 years ago, man learned to write and use a cart with wheels. Christianity began less than 2 years ago. The printing press came this year. And then less than 2 months ago, during this whole 50-year span of human history, the steam engine provided a new source of power. Newton explored the meaning of gravity. Last month, electric lights and telephones and automobiles and airplanes became available. Only last week, we developed penicillin and television and nuclear power. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ails as it dispels old. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. But this country was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. The unknown was conquered by those who moved forward, and so will space. And if our capsuled history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. But why the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And you may as well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was later to die on Mount Everest, was asked why he did want to climb it. He said, because it's there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it, and the moons and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which mankind has ever embarked. A young child stands barefoot in the middle of a field. It's night. There's very little light pollution. just the riot of sound, cicadas and peepers filling the spring night. But the child hears none of that. The earth around him lost, beneath a sky littered with light, the uncountable stars above his head, a vast spill of glittering diamonds. He doesn't know the names of the stars, doesn't know about hydrogen or galaxies or orbital mechanics, but he knows this. Something up there is calling. It's not a sound, not a word. It's a pull, a longing, a dare. For me, that was how it began. The Milky Way fanning out over my head. That night, so many decades ago, I lost a part of myself, a part that I have never been able to reclaim. For many of us, this experience, or one very like it, becomes formative, even electrifying. I personally remember being transfigured, mouth open, paralyzed in that wash of starlight, and I can imagine how this might have been for our earliest ancestors, gazing upwards with bafflement and curiosity. I can imagine that the first stirrings of religion were born this way too, in awe. It doesn't take a poet to see the canopy of night as humanity's very first cathedral. The star-filled sky, our first scripture. And I have no doubt that somewhere deep in the soul of humanity, across all cultures and all centuries, that curiosity, that longing to know, has never really left us. We are still pulled upward and outward by something older than language and more enduring than fear. Our eyes full of stars, a tiny voice whispers, "This is what we were made for." We were made for wonder. The heavens have always called us onward and upward. And in every civilization that we have a record for, there have been those who looked up. Gilgamesh followed the stars to the edge of the world, seeking immortality. Polynesian sailors followed the stars across vast oceans in search of new lands. Astronomers in Babylon, Egypt, China, Mesoamerica, they built temples to capture the magic, the movement, the secrets of the celestial bodies. The stars have been guides, gods, omens, mysteries, beckoning us to seek, to risk, to reach beyond ourselves, to look up and ask questions that begin with, what if? But it's only been in the lifetimes of some of us here in this room that we have begun to answer some of those questions. Some of you here remember what it was like in the 50s and 60s, and if you don't, no penalty. It's been a while. But the world had emerged from World War II, battered, yes, but hopeful. America was prosperous, confident, and afraid. The Red Scare gripped us. The Soviet Union, once our ally against fascism, had become the new enemy. Communism was the new boogeyman. Senator Joseph McCarthy saw communists around every corner, and you learned quickly what you could say and to whom. You learned to lower your voice, to be small, to trust your neighbor a little less than the day before. The Cold War was escalating. And then in a blink, America was losing that war. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. For a polished sphere no larger than a beach ball, about that big, its impact was cataclysmic. TV and radio imagined it constantly beeping over our heads. But Sputnik wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a symbol, a signal that America was being left behind. In response, the United States poured resources into science education, rocketry, and aerospace development. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was established the year after, 1958. But before America could catch its breath, the Soviets jumped forward again. April 12, 1961, a 27-year-old Soviet pilot named Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin became the first human to leave the Earth and orbit our planet. Gagarin, the son of a carpenter and dairy farmer, had survived hunger and hardship and Nazi occupation of his homeland. He loved to fly. And out of the 200 or more candidates, he was chosen not only for his skill and his daring, but for his calm, his charisma, and his ability to inspire others. The launch was incredibly dangerous. No one knew then if the human body could survive the stresses of launch and spaceflight. But in just over 100 minutes, Gagarin's capsule rose into the sky and punched out of the atmosphere. The very first words spoken from space were his. He said, "I see Earth. It is so beautiful." There have been many moments when history lurches forward, the fate of humanity alters. That day was one of them. The stars were no longer out of reach. The era of human spaceflight had begun. 1 year later, in 1962, President Kennedy delivered his moonshot speech that I just quoted from. At the time of that speech, most believed that reaching the moon was a challenge we could not achieve. That the Apollo program was pure arrogance or some kind of Cold War propaganda. And maybe it was, at least in part. But it also came to be more than that. It became a statement of vision, a call to greatness, a dare, and one that got heard in some unlikely places. Five years after Gagarin's flight, and 4 after Kennedy's challenge, Star Trek premiered on American television. At first glance, the show was low-budget science fiction. At second glance, it was too. The years since have been very kind, and today Star Trek means quite a bit more. To many, Star Trek was a subversive dream written in stardust, another dare, because the show imagined a humanity that had transcended its ancient divisions. The Cold War, long over. Hunger and poverty, history. Planet Earth was united in purpose and spirit. Technology was used not to dominate, but to explore. Curiosity and diplomacy were the highest human virtues. In this future, the crew of the Enterprise traveled the stars not to colonize or conquer, but to learn, to help, and to grow. The bridge of that starship was diverse. Black, white, Asian, Russian, male, female, alien, and all of them were treated with dignity. All were respected. It is impossible to overstate how much this mattered. In the 1960s, even with McCarthy gone, the national stage was not quiet. The civil rights movement was in full voice, and American culture was evolving rapidly. Yet on that bridge, diversity and dignity and unity, there was this clear vision of what might come next for us. Star Trek was a specific path forward, and this vision inspired a generation. Not just dreamers, writers, and artists, but scientists, engineers, and astronauts. Astronaut Mae Jemison, the first black woman in space, called it one of her inspirations, and its actors her role models. Star Trek wasn't just television. It was a catechism for a different kind of humanity. It taught us that any journey outward must also be a journey inward, towards justice, unity, and wisdom. And unfolding directly from Kennedy's speech, Star Trek told us to go, and go boldly, because out there was important, because the universe was too vast and too amazing to ignore. After the Apollo program came Voyager. Human dreams launched towards alien suns. I think Voyager just crossed the 1 light day threshold this past week. 1 light day away. 13 years after Voyager 1 left Earth, Carl Sagan suggested that we aim its cameras back towards the Earth. And that's how we capture the image we now call the pale blue dot. Our home, our Earth. Every human being who ever lived, just a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Of that image, Sagan said, quote, "It's been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world." For Sagan, the image of the pale blue dot was not an escape from the problems of Earth. It was a vantage point from which to see them clearly. Sagan taught us that the carbon in our cells, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, every atom of it was forged, literally forged, in the heart of a dying star. He reminded us that we are not in the universe. We are the universe, awakened, aware, and wondering. He said we are made of star stuff. He invited us to see the universe not just as material, but as majesty. Not just as data, but as magic. We don't really talk like this anymore. We don't talk about wonder and awe as inspiring us, as calling us out and up. We don't really talk about stars anymore. We talk about wars overseas, voting rights here at home, the economy teetering on the edge of collapse. We talk about the climate. Probably not enough. We talk about our neighbors being disappeared in a healthcare system that is just broken. We whisper to each other that everything is terrible. Somebody mentions NASA, and we scoff. The fearful mind says, stay small, stay safe, stay silent, stay put. The practical mind says, first things first, fix what's broken, fight what's wrong, dream later. The cynical mind says, grow up, wake up, stop dreaming. We'd only make a mess of it up there, too. But I wonder if dreaming, looking up, I wonder if these are not luxuries for quieter times. In fact, I'm beginning to think they're anything but. What if the dream was never the reward for surviving the struggle? What if dreaming was the reason for the struggle? Not nostalgia, not a callback to some imagined former greatness, not a denial of the moment we are currently in. King didn't wait for civility before marching. Curie didn't wait for equality before claiming 2 Nobel Prizes. Kennedy didn't wait for technology before daring us to go to the moon. We dream. We dare to dream boldly because the alternative is surrender. And surrender is not worthy of what we are. Look, we need action because justice has never once arrived on its own. We need resilience because the arc of the moral universe is long, and we are clearly not done bending it. We need each other because none of us is large enough to carry all this alone. But survival is not enough. Bread alone will never fill the hole in an aching soul. Wonder is not what we feel like when life is going well. It's what keeps us human when it isn't. It's not merely a feeling. Wonder is a capacity, a power, a faculty. It's what allows us to see the person in front of us as genuinely other, genuinely mysterious, genuinely worthy of attention. Without it, justice is just a transaction. Without it, a stranger remains a stranger. Without it, we cannot imagine a world different from the one we are in. What holds it up, what holds all of it up, the action, the resilience, the beloved community, is wonder. Exactly. What holds it up is wonder, not the last thing, the first thing. April 12th was Yuri's night, celebrating Gagarin's wild ride across the sky. In my humble opinion, this holiday does not get nearly enough attention, and I'm going to challenge that as I go forward into my life. I personally see Yuri's Night, or as the United Nations calls it, the International Day of Human Spaceflight, as a reminder that 65 years ago, in another time, a time of fear and failure, of division and despair, we humans were still capable of doing things that were awesome, unifying, and beautiful. Big things, bold things. A couple of months ago, 50 years after the last human walked on the moon, NASA went back. That takes my breath away. Gagarin showed us where we are. Sagan taught us what we are. Star Trek imagined who we might become. I'm also reminded that a little over a century ago, Father Teilhard de Chardin tried to make sense of it all. He dreamed that the universe was not winding down, it was waking up. He imagined the cosmos as a thing evolving, and not just physically, but spiritually, that it was all going somewhere, toward greater complexity, toward greater consciousness, toward greater love. Again, this is before all of the others. Chardin was writing like this. He called the destination the omega point. Not an ending, but a fulfillment of purpose. Every supernova, every new star formed from the ashes of the old, every new planet shaped from riches gleaned by cosmic ruin, each successive act in cosmic history is mirrored by the arc of human history, where every act of courage, every spark of curiosity, every leap of imagination is the universe more alive, more aware, and more filled with purpose. You and I, our lives and service, our dreams and passions are all part of a great promise, he said. Our participation in a sacred unfolding. It's a story as old as time. Not two stories, the cosmos and us. One. And one that can only end in glory. Onward, upward, forever. It's a bold story. And if that is the story we belong to, and I actually think it is, then wonder is not optional. It is essential. If that is our story, we need the stars, not to flee the troubles of earth, but to remember what earth means to us. If that is our story, all we need to do is look up. Something in us shifts. The smallness falls away. Fear and pettiness lose their grip, and we then turn back toward the world, not as we left it, but maybe for the first time we see it as it could be. That is wonder. We are made for it. Maybe we are made from it, too. Gagarin's Dare, Star Trek's Vision, Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, Teilhard's Omega Point, in all of this, I remember that boy standing underneath a spill of stars, and I find again and again that I am not diminished. I am enlarged. Here's what I have for you. If you haven't yet, go see the movie Project Hail Mary. Anybody seen this yet? It's phenomenal. You can even stream it from the comfort of your own home. Highly recommend it. An unlikely astronaut is sent on an impossible mission to save the Earth. What could be better? It's my new favorite movie. Go stream it. As soon as the weather clears, maybe a little bit more, here's my second ask. Sometime later this week, just once, go outside at night. Or stand at a window. Or simply stop wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing and look up into the night sky. You don't need a telescope. You don't need to know the names of anything. Just look. Look and let the looking do the work. And notice what shifts in you when you do. That's my practice for you today. Looking is where it starts. Not because the stars will solve anything. I'm not doing astrology this morning. Look because beauty is worth it. It doesn't cancel out suffering. It's just worth it on its own. And because when we look up, that's when we can remember what we are. And what we are is this, the universe, awake and wondering at itself. And as long as we can wonder, we are still alive, still becoming, still reaching. My challenge is this. We can let the cynics whisper that dreams are for the naive. We can let the timid shrink in fear. We can let the foolish praise their own short-sightedness. But let us lift our gaze together. In our wonder lies our strength. In our questions lie our wisdom. In our reaching lies our purpose. We are stardust, the children of stars. We carry galaxies in our blood, and constellations fill our dreams. This is our home and our birthright. And that is why we will go boldly onward, upward, together, as far as wonder can reach. May it ever be so.